nasty, nasty, nasty work, Tiffany Hayes. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. You are pushing for physical harm and violence on Caitlin Clark because she busted your you-know-what in a basketball game that you was doing a lot of trash talking into. This is nasty work.
There's a major difference between competitive emotions shown during a basketball game and behavior that crosses into off-court territory involving threats or harmful rhetoric. Trash talk, physical play, and emotional intensity are normal parts of professional basketball and are governed by league rules, officiating, and the WNBA's disciplinary system. Those situations are expected and handled within the structure of the sport itself. However, when a verified professional athlete publicly interacts with social media content containing references to physical harm toward another individual, the issue moves beyond normal basketball competition and enters a far more serious legal, institutional, and corporate category. For weeks, the Indiana Fever situation has already raised questions about accountability involving coaching decisions, officiating disputes, and front office management. But now, the focus has shifted toward a completely different matter involving Tiffany Hayes and her social media activity. This situation is no longer about gameplay or basketball strategy. Instead, it centers on professional responsibilities of a public athlete operating on a visible digital platform and the obligations this creates for the WNBA, the Golden State Valkyries organization, and the WNBA Players Association. The discussion is not about spreading or amplifying threatening comments themselves, but about examining the documented conduct and understanding what it means institutionally. It also raises a larger consistency issue regarding league discipline. In the same week that Stephanie White reportedly faced league punishment for criticizing officiating, the WNBA is now confronted with separate controversy involving social media behavior. How the league responds to both situations will reveal a great deal about its enforcement priorities, disciplinary standards, and the message it sends to players, teams, media, and fans across the league.
I cannot believe Tiffany Hayes went on social media and did this. So there was people in the social media world, and there's weirdos out there, okay, that Caitlin Clark's had a stalker already. So these things are to be taken serious, regardless if you want to or not. We watched someone get arrested for stalking this woman, okay?
The on-court confrontation is important because it directly connects to the off-court situation that followed. During the Indiana Fever's 90-82 victory over the Golden State Valkyries, Tiffany Hayes was involved in a visibly intense physical and psychological exchange with Caitlin Clark. The interaction included aggressive face-to-face contact, clearly intended to disrupt Clark's rhythm and focus during the game. Clark responded in dramatic fashion by hitting a deep 33-foot three-pointer from far beyond the arc, then verbally responding to Hayes in a moment that quickly became one of the most talked-about highlights of the matchup. Following that exchange, Hayes struggled to maintain the same level of effectiveness on the court. Her shooting efficiency declined, and the Valkyries ultimately lost the game by 8 points. Those outcomes are reflected directly in the official box score and game record. However, while the competitive exchange itself remained within the boundaries of basketball rivalry and emotional intensity, the situation took on a different level of significance once the activity shifted onto social media. That is where the broader institutional and disciplinary questions for the league truly began.
That. And then another person said, listen, I got some cousins. We don't need to speak about that. We'll ride at dawn upon request. Just let me know. So this person is saying, I got some cousins that'll do physical harm and commit to violence on Caitlin Clark that has nothing to do with on the court. You're talking about harming someone violently off the floor in their regular day-to-day lives. This is nasty, regardless if this person is serious or not. As a professional, you should not be entertaining this. You should not be laughing and kikiing and ha-haing and pushing for this, Tiffany Hayes. This is nasty work. Tiffany Hayes puts "that's real" with the crying face. It's not funny that you are.
In the hours following the game, Tiffany Hayes reportedly interacted with social media content related to the confrontation involving Caitlin Clark. Some of the messages referenced the phrase "crash out," a slang expression commonly used to describe someone losing emotional control in a way that escalates beyond normal behavior. In the context of a heated professional basketball rivalry, Hayes' engagement with those posts quickly drew attention online, and became widely circulated across social media platforms. The situation became significantly more serious when one fan reportedly posted a message offering to involve family members in physically harming Clark outside of basketball. The wording of the message was described as direct and explicit, not as sports-related trash talk or competitive exaggeration. According to the documented exchange, the post referenced the availability of people willing to commit harm against Clark in her private life. Hayes then responded to that message in a way that appeared to validate or encourage it, reportedly replying that it was real, alongside an emoji expressing amusement. That interaction immediately shifted the situation from normal sports rivalry into a far more troubling conversation about professional responsibility, athlete conduct on social media, and the standards expected by the league and its organizations.
For this Tiffany Hayes, this is nasty work. Tiffany Hayes puts "that's real" with the crying face. It's not funny that you are pushing for this. The WNBA needs to come out and suspend her ass right away. Okay, a fine isn't enough. She needs to be fined and suspended immediately. There's no way she should be.
The institutional analysis of the situation requires careful precision because the issue extends far beyond basketball competition. In documented and publicly visible exchanges, Tiffany Hayes reportedly gave an affirmative response to social media content that explicitly referenced coordinated off-court physical violence against a named individual. Rather than reporting the content, condemning it, or clarifying that the comments were inappropriate, Hayes responded in a manner that appeared to communicate approval and amusement. When a verified professional athlete with a major public platform reacts positively to comments involving physical harm toward another player, the matter shifts away from sports rivalry and becomes a question of corporate conduct, legal exposure, and personal safety. The seriousness of the situation is heightened by the fact that Caitlin Clark has previously been connected to documented stalking incidents that required law enforcement involvement. Because of that history, public engagement with threatening or harmful language directed toward her carries a different level of concern than a typical online argument between athletes. In a digital environment where public comments can quickly spread to large audiences, responses from high-profile figures do not exist in isolation. They can influence or validate individuals who may already be emotionally invested or potentially motivated to act irresponsibly. Following the backlash, Hayes reportedly began blocking large numbers of accounts that criticized or documented her interaction with the threatening content. Critics argue that this did not represent accountability or clarification, but instead functioned as an attempt to distance herself from the consequences of the situation without directly addressing the original conduct. As a result, the controversy has evolved into a broader discussion about athlete responsibility on social media, league standards of conduct, and how professional organizations should respond when public interactions move beyond competitive sports into issues involving safety and institutional liability.
This is ridiculous, okay? And now what do you have? Tiffany Hayes can't handle it. And what is Tiffany Hayes doing? Tiffany Hayes is now blocking people on social media because they're calling her out for her immaturity and her lack of professionalism and the stupidity. It's stupid.
The Golden State Valkyries organization now faces a direct institutional responsibility that cannot simply be ignored or postponed. Because the team employs a player whose publicly documented social media conduct helped create controversy surrounding potential safety concerns, the organization must now consider the broader implications for future matchups against the Indiana Fever. This is not merely a reputational issue or a social media controversy. It creates real operational and legal considerations that the Valkyrie security personnel, legal advisors, and front office officials are expected to evaluate carefully. The upcoming Fever, Valkyries games may now require additional security planning and heightened attention because of the public nature of the situation and the reactions it generated online. Regardless of whether the WNBA ultimately issues discipline, the organization itself still has an obligation to assess the environment surrounding these games and determine how it will respond internally. The way the Valkyries address their players' conduct will also be closely watched by the league office, corporate sponsors, media outlets, and fans. In many ways, the franchise's response has become an institutional statement of its own, one that may influence how the league's standards of accountability and professionalism are perceived moving forward.
disgusting. Look at this. At WNBPA, at Kathy Engelberg, at WNBA Commish, at WNBA. Hope you do something about Tiffany Hayes inciting hate with fans on social media and inciting violence. Violence, you guys.
The consistency question is one that the WNBA league office cannot avoid, and it deserves to be stated with complete analytical clarity. Within the same 7-day period, the league issued a documented fine against Stephanie White for public criticism of officiating. That enforcement action was swift, publicly confirmed, and consistent with the league's established rules governing coach conduct, sending a clear institutional message that public commentary on referees carries financial consequences. However, the league is now also dealing with a separate documented situation involving a verified player engaging with social media content that referenced off-court physical violence against a named individual in a manner interpreted by some as affirmative endorsement. While these two situations are not equivalent in their specific nature, one involving officiating criticism and the other involving perceived implications for personal safety, their differences actually intensify the importance of consistent enforcement rather than diminish it. If the league responds more quickly or more visibly to officiating criticism than a conduct that raises personal safety concerns, it risks sending an inconsistent institutional signal to players, sponsors, broadcast partners, and other stakeholders whose confidence depends on the league being viewed as a professionally governed organization. The WNBA Players Association also carries an independent responsibility in this context, as its mandate includes protecting the welfare of all its members. Both Caitlin Clark and Tiffany Hayes are members of the association, and its response to situations where one member's conduct appears to create safety concerns for another will be closely examined as a measure of its commitment to player welfare in practice rather than just in principle. From an institutional standpoint, the league's corrective path is relatively clear: a formal, proportionate response that reflects the seriousness of the situation and establishes a consistent standard, ideally, issued before the next scheduled matchup between the teams involved. While the exact form of discipline remains within the league's discretion, the necessity of response is framed as essential for maintaining players' safety confidence, corporate trust, and overall institutional credibility at the individual level. Accountability would require direct and explicit acknowledgement that the engagement with such content was inappropriate, along with an understanding of why it generated concern, delivered without deflection or avoidance. More broadly, the situation highlights the gap between the WNBA's rapid commercial growth and behavioral and institutional frameworks needed to support that expansion. As the league continues to grow through new franchises, broadcast agreements, and commercial partnerships, the systems governing conduct, communication, and accountability must evolve at a similar pace to sustain long-term credibility and stability.